Now that hopefully you've gotten your feet wet in SOLIDWORKS, let's set up a couple of things in your SOLIDWORKS install to make sure that you see the same stuff that I see on my screen when I'm working. That's just going to make things a little bit easier for you. So let's start with a blank SOLIDWORKS screen. No documents open at this point. And we'll go up to Tools and down to Options. Now there are a lot of options here, but don't worry, there's just a few that we care about right now. We're going to go to the General tab over on the left. And down at the bottom of the first section, let's enable the freeze bar. That is a new feature in SOLIDWORKS 2012, and it is oh so useful. Also, right below that, when rebuild error occurs, we don't want to stop or prompt. We want to just continue. We don't want SOLIDWORKS giving us lots of extra warnings about things. Let's just barrel right on through. Also, let's go over to the Display/Selection tab and head into the Part/Assembly Tangent Edge display box. And we want to show those as phantom. That'll make things a little easier to read. Also, in our Assembly Transparency for In-Context Edit, let's set that to Opaque Assembly. That's going to make SOLIDWORKS perform much better. I tend to do that even though I have a pretty powerful machine. And also, down here at the very bottom, I like to disable this checkbox for Enable Selection through Transparency. That just makes it easier to click on things that we've made transparent. Next, let's head over to the Sketch settings. And in here, we want to check this very top box for Auto Rotate View Normal to Sketch Plane on Sketch Creation. It's a long name, but very useful. Also, I do want to display the control polygon for splines by default. Down here, I do want to also enable on-screen numeric input on entity creation if you haven't already, and enable create dimension only when value is entered. We want both of those things. And finally, let's make sure that Show Curvature Comb Bounding Curve is set as well. Let's head next over to the External References tab, and we want to make sure that Do Not Create References External to the Model is checked. That's an important one. Next, we'll head over to the Feature Manager tab, and inside there, we want to make sure, first of all, let's disable Use Transparent Flyout, because that's just going to make the Feature Manager easier to read on our screen. Now, in our Hide/Show Tree Items area, I like to make sure that all of these are set to automatic if there is an automatic option, because that's just going to make our tree a lot cleaner when we're not using these advanced features. And finally, let's go down to the Messages, Errors, and Warnings tab and make sure that we uncheck Show Errors Every Rebuild and uncheck the Warn Before Saving Documents with Update Errors. One of the most frustrating things for new SOLIDWORKS users is just the number of dialogues that tend to pop up and kind of scare you a little bit. So I find that for new users, it's best to just turn all of these off and keep life a little bit simpler and a little bit less stressful. We can find out more about how those work in the future. When we're done with that, I'll just hit Enter to exit those and commit those changes. Next, I want to go to File, New, and create a new assembly. Cancel out of the default dialog, head up to Tools, and all the way down to Customize. Now let's make sure our Sketch tools are visible in our tool ribbon at the top, and head to the Commands tab. Inside there, I want to find the Sketch commands, and down toward the bottom there's this little picture of a mountain range called Sketch Picture. Let's drag that out into our Sketch toolbar, because we're going to be making use of that button in the future. Also, we want to go to our Blocks tools and find the Make Block button. Let's take that and drag that into our tool manager as well. Now, just so that you know, if I drag one of these off of the command manager and the little red X appears and I let go, that goes away. So we can add and remove tools really easily to our toolbar. Now, be careful with that. We don't want to overdo this. Let's just add the bare minimum tools we want necessary here. If you clutter this up too much, it's going to be really hard to find what you're looking for. After that, I want to go to the keyboard menu here, and let's search for Sketch. And under Insert Sketch, I'm going to click in the Shortcuts box here and type the letter X. I like for the letter X to bring up my sketcher. Now that's up to you. You can choose whatever shortcut you prefer, but I find X to be a really useful one. Next, let's search for Hide, and we'll find Hide/Show Bodies, and I'm going to set that to H. and it says that that's being used for something, but that's totally fine. I don't use H for anything else. Next, we'll head to Hide All Types, and I like to set that to W. Once again, that's up to you. And finally, let's head up here and type Save. And my file Save As, I'm always going to set this to Control-Shift-S because lots of programs use that, and I like to use Save As pretty frequently. Finally, let's head over to the Mouse Gestures tab. Make sure we've enabled mouse gestures, as I mentioned before. 8 gestures is what we want. And if we scroll down here, you will see that I have set my Part, Assembly, and Sketch buttons to all be the same views. So that way, no matter where I am in SOLIDWORKS, the views are going to pop up when I use my right mouse button. So let's click OK to that. Let's right-click on any tool area. I'm just going to right-click out here in Space. And I want to make sure that my Motion Manager is turned off. We're not going to need that. So let's just uncheck that to make it go away. Then right-click again, and I actually do want to see my Selection Filter. So let's show the Selection Filter toolbar. That's going to be all these buttons down here, which are really useful, but the main reason we put them there is because beginners tend to turn on selection filters by accident, and this is a good reminder to check that if things aren't working the way that you're expecting. Also, right up here in our command ribbon, we have these tabs for different types of tools, right? If I right-click on any tab, you'll see that I have several options here to turn on and off. Let's just keep that in mind as we're working. I'm going to close that back up, and we'll add some more of them later. And finally, one little tip for you. I find that often beginners tend to lose their command manager. There are several ways that that can happen. If I drag on the command manager toolbar, it just pulls it out here into a floating window. And sometimes that'll get moved off in space and you can't find it or whatever. If you double click on the title of the command manager, it goes back to its default location. That's really nice. It's also good to know that if you right-click the Command Manager, there's a checkbox here for Command Manager. Click that. The Command Manager goes away, and instead we get these little toolbars that are kind of all over the place. All you have to do to get back your Command Manager is right-click in any of those blank areas, come up, and check Command Manager. That's going to bring that back. And this is the cleanest way to keep up with your tools visually on the screen. All right, so we're all set, and I think we're ready to start setting up some default document templates.